What is up, guys? My name is Jason Ankin and this is my vlog channel. So yes, we have another vlog entry today. Today's video, I'm going to talk to you about my specific dietary philosophy, how I actually eat and why I eat the way that I eat. So I have done a few videos in the past on essentially how I've came to the conclusion of what my diet actually is. I will link those up in the corner. So yes, I have a number of things I want to get through. So yes, basically, as you well know, that I have a lot of experience in sort of sports and exercise sciences. I've basically over 7 years full-time education studying sports science and fitness and stuff like this, and I learned nutrition through studying in sports studies, level 3, level 4, level 5. I think I did level 6 as well. So basically I've studied nutrition at many different levels. I've also studied biology and human physiology and things like biochemistry. So these things have influenced my diet to a certain degree, at least the fundamentals, and understanding things like calories, and understanding carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals, essential and non-essential nutrients, stuff like that. However, even though I've done a lot of deep intensive study into nutrition, how I've actually came to my own dietary philosophy has been kind of individual. I haven't necessarily been influenced specifically by the sports science approach. So basically the way that I eat is that my dietary preference is what I like to call a plant-based omnivore. So plant-based omnivore is, if you imagine there's a continuum of sort of diet, one extreme to the other. And on one extreme you'll have the vegan. So the vegan is somebody who doesn't eat any animal products whatsoever, not even honey, and they won't even use leather for clothing or whatever. But then on the other side of the equation you have the extreme carnivore, so someone who eats nothing but pure meat. They just eat meat, and even on the most extreme cases you will have what's called raw carnivores. So raw carnivores are individuals that are eating raw meat, raw eggs and stuff like that. So there's this continuum of diet, and you basically fall somewhere along this continuum. In the middle would be like an omnivore. I fall more towards the plant-based side of the continuum, but I incorporate a little bit of meat consumption and a little bit of animal products into my diet. Now, I grew up pretty much as an omnivore, pretty typical diet, but as I've grown up and I've started to learn more about diet and started to listen to my body more, I've started to realize that plant-based is probably a lot healthier than sort of more meat consumption. A lot of studies are starting to show that especially red meat, high saturated fats and stuff like that can cause things like cholesterol. And there's a really good experiment. You can go onto Google and just type in, meat consumption and cancer, meat consumption and heart disease, meat consumption and diabetes or stroke. And what you will find is that when you type this into Google, study after study after study after study will come up showing you the link between high meat consumption as actually contributing towards causing things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, etc. Whereas you can go do the opposite. So type into Google plant-based diet and heart disease, plant-based diet and cancer, plant-based diet and diabetes, and what you will find is that it will show study after study after study showing the relationship between plant-based diets reducing these things. And it's simple logic. If you're consuming a highly meat-based diet, it's going to have it's essentially very rich. It's very rich in nutrition, and basically the idea behind that is your body just isn't designed to cope with that amount of nutrients so consistently over a long period of time. Because people these days, they eat 3 to 4 meals a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Humans just were never designed to do that. We were never that successful at hunting. So yeah, I've basically started to lean more towards the plant-based side of things. And I even did experiment a little bit with being a vegan at one point, and this was for about a year. It wasn't something that I it wasn't fulfilling for me. So basically I then got back into meat consumption. Now this is the problem with sort of veganism, and obviously a lot of veganism's becoming quite popular today, and there's a lot of hype around it. In fact, in our country, I believe there was a study showing that 9% of the population have become vegan, which is like the highest number ever. But the problem with that figure is that 9% has a high turnover rate. So meaning people are trying veganism and then people are dropping out of it. So that 9% isn't actually fully accurate. What's research has actually shown is that at least, I think it's 80% of individuals that go vegan or go vegetarian end up going back to meat consumption. So if you take that 9% and do, 20% of that 9% is roughly 2% of the population. So that's actually quite a small figure of people that are actually vegan. It's only 2%, maybe 2% of the population turn vegan and stay vegan for the rest of their life. So that's actually pretty low. What that actually means is the other, 70% or whatever, they're trying veganism, but then they go back to eating meat consumption. So that's telling you that 98% of the population of the world or of our country basically eat meat, and it's part of our diet. It's part of our diet. It's a fact of life. However, I still strongly averse to what's going on within sort of animal farming. I think animal farming is quite heinous and it is very inhumane. So what I've tried to do is try to reduce the amount of meat that I'm actually consuming. So I only have meat roughly once a day on average. And I've started to purge myself of eating red meats, and I don't eat, stopping eating bird meats as well. I want to get it down to where my diet is basically, I'm only consuming fish and eggs, and I basically want to eliminate red meats, bird meats, and dairy completely from my diet. So I'm getting more and more closer to this sort of the plant-based side of this spectrum, and I think that is healthier. I think you do need a little bit of meat in your diet, and I think fish is kind of my favorite. I think it's also, fish aren't as, let's say there aren't as, usually fish is caught at sea, it's wild. Obviously there are fish farms and stuff like this, but I don't want to support mass animal farming and stuff like that. So I kind of have to, I rationalize, fish as causing the least harm and the least suffering and stuff like that. I don't want to contribute to that industry. And my rationale for this diet that I follow is basically, I studied a lot about biology and human biology in the ancient past, and this is why I'm opposed to the carnivore diet. And I've said this before in past videos, and it's to do with the fact that people just are not that successful at hunting. If you look at modern hunter-gatherers that live in like African savanna, where we evolved, their dietary success rate, or their hunting success rate, is 1 in 20. So 1 in 20 hunts end in a kill. That's really poor if you compare that to normal predators. So for example, things like lions have a 1 in 5 success rate, cheetahs have a 1 in 2 success rate, wild dogs have like a 4 out of 5 success rate. So we're not even on the spectrum. We're way behind. So we would have made a successful kill once every 1 to 2 weeks. What we would have done is we would have probably ate plant-based food for about a week or 2 weeks until we made a successful kill. And then we would have gorged on meat, and then we would have probably did like a fast because we would have had no food. And then we would have started gathering more plant-based foods and then went out hunting, and that kind of would have been a cycle that we would have repeated. So the majority, and at least my sort of view of things, the majority of food that our ancestors probably would have eaten in sort of our original natural environment was probably plant-based. Most likely it would have been starches and stuff like that, and it would have been supplemented with fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. And then when a kill was made, then we would have gorged ourselves on meats to top up with all those fatty acids and amino acids and stuff like that. So that's my rationale for having like a plant-based omnivorous diet. Technically, even having 1 meal a day of meat is still, in my view, a little bit too rich, because we probably wouldn't have even been that successful. So the fact that people are eating 3 meals a day that contain meat, in my opinion, is just it's way too good. You know, you've got it, people in the modern era have got it really, really good. So yeah, how my diet actually developed was basically just through a process of listening to my body. So basically, I would put certain foods into my body, and I would just pay attention to how it made me feel the whole way through the process of ingestion, digestion, and elimination, let's say. So I would be able, from this, my body would actually tell me what foods work in my body the best. I actually did a video on this called Conscious Eating. So how to actually sort of, if you just pay attention to the foods that you're putting in your body, just be aware of what the effect that it's having on you. Your body will tell you whether the food you're eating is good or bad, just through the reactions that you experience. And then basically when you have a negative reaction, you know your body's telling you, don't eat that. And that's, from this year, I was able to eliminate, I think there was 4 main food items that I was able to eliminate from this process. The one was grains. I started to notice grains made me bloat. So I felt that was a negative reaction, negative side effect. It was kind of my body telling me that these aren't working inside me. They're causing problems. Dairy also started to cause problems, and I used to feel kind of sickly. Once you start to pay, I was drinking dairy my whole life, but once I started to pay attention to how it made me feel, then I started to realize this doesn't really feel good in my stomach. It kind of feels disgusting. And I started to notice there was a relationship between dairy consumption and my eczema, and also my hay fever, meaning the more dairy and cheese and stuff that I took, the more I started to have hay fever like symptoms and eczema. So whatever is in dairy, it's basically causes inflammation within my body. It was actually making me sick. So that was probably the worst reaction that I noticed from a food once I started to pay attention to it. The next thing was processed junk food. Now this is something I still have a problem with. I still eat sweets and sometimes cakes and biscuits and stuff like this, but every time I always eat something, I always feel like, why did you do that? It doesn't sit right in my stomach. It doesn't sit right in my bowels. It doesn't energize me. It gives me a headache sometimes. And then the fourth item that I noticed was caffeine. So obviously caffeine is basically a stimulant. And I realized that, you know, it gives you a good feeling, but that good feeling is unnatural. It's synthetic. You know, you're basically adrenalizing your body. And I noticed negative side effects from caffeine consumption, especially if I took maybe 2 to 3 cups a day. At the end of the day, I would be kind of almost like a little bit fatigued, and I can almost sometimes get a little bit agitated and frustrated and stuff like that on caffeine. I still do take caffeine, and it's something I have to work on still eliminating, because it's quite addictive, and like I said, it has good side effects and good, I would say, short-term benefits, but long-term benefits probably bad. And what I concluded through this process is that there were essentially 6 food groups that worked well within my body, and they were meat, fruits, vegetables, root vegetables, nuts, and seeds. So these 6 food groups and all of their varieties, I couldn't find a problem with any of them. Every time I consumed meat or fruit or vegetables or root vegetables or nuts or seeds, there was virtually 0 side effects. And this aligns with my sort of rationale behind my diet, is that, you know, in the ancient past, when people lived in the wilderness, they wouldn't have been able to get access to things like grains or dairy the way that we can, or processed junk food or caffeine. It just didn't exist. They might have been able to get some of it, but they would have likely lived off root vegetables. That would have probably been their main starch, you know, root vegetables dug from under the soil and stuff like that. I am aware that some tribes are able to get access to grains and create breads and stuff like that, but not the breads that we have today. They're kind of far too processed and far too sort of, the grains are very hybridized, and even if you just look at a loaf of bread and look at the ingredients, you can see like 30 or 40 different ingredients in one food item, so you can tell that's not natural just by looking at it. So yeah, it was just really a process of paying attention to what the reactions that your body experiences when you put food into food into your body. And because your body is designed a very specific way, it's evolved a very specific way, it's naturally going to tell you that's having a good reaction, that's having a bad reaction. And once a food has a bad reaction, you eliminate it. Once a food has a good reaction, you retain it. And basically you do this process over maybe a period of 6 months, and your body slowly but surely guides you towards the optimal diet for your physiology. So yeah, I consume roughly 3 meals a day. I would ideally like to get this down to 2 1,000 calorie meals a day. So yes, my first 2 meals, my breakfast and my lunch, are plant-based. I don't, like I said, I have 1 meat-based meal in the day. I basically usually in the morning I have mixed nuts, and I have quite a few big portions of fruit, maybe 3 bananas, and maybe, so I'll have like 50 grams of mixed nuts. I'll have maybe 2 to 3 bananas, and then maybe 2 to 3 other pieces of fruit, maybe like oranges, pears, or maybe half a box of grapes or something like that. And that'll be my breakfast. For lunch, I will usually have a root vegetable based meal. So I usually have something like potatoes. And I use like a coconut oil cheese. So I don't use dairy cheese. I use like a coconut oil cheese grated over the top, and just like tomato sauce. And it's just really because you just get a lot of carbohydrates, and maybe I'll have another couple of pieces of fruit with that as well. So my first 2 meals are quite plant-based. And then in the evening before I go to bed, usually dinner time, I usually have like maybe 2 large pieces of fish, and I'll have that with a portion of vegetables. And one thing I'm not doing right now is that I want to start adding in maybe like a dessert at the end of the day, because I think that will help prevent me from eating junk food. If I have a dessert planned, for my dinner, then I'm less inclined to eat junk food throughout the rest of the day, because I know I have to kind of save myself for my dessert or whatever. And at least that way I'm able to control the dessert that I eat, so that I make something that's healthy and kind of, because I have a sweet tooth, so I want to make sure that it's healthy but also sweet. So that's basically how much meals I eat. I do want to get to the point where I'm eating only 2 meals a day, because I like the idea of sort of maybe eating my meals within a 4-hour window and then just fasting the rest of the day. Yeah, so I've already talked about things I've avoided. I avoid dairy consumption. I avoid whole grains. I avoid processed junk food as much as possible. And I'm trying to eliminate caffeine as well. So these are the things that I notice have a negative side effect on me. And another thing that I've noticed is just what the hell is wrong with the food industry. The food industry has just become an absolute embarrassment. Like when I walk into superstores, I'm just appalled at the amount of food that exists that is just utter rubbish. And I would hazard a guess that you're probably looking at like 80% of the food that is sold in superstores is absolute garbage, meaning that it should not be consumed by humans whatsoever. Like I mainly get from 2 to 3 aisles in the whole superstore. I will go to the fruit aisle, the vegetable aisle, and I will also go to the meat aisle. And basically, on occasions, I will go to the frozen vegetables as well. But every other aisle, whether it's the dairy aisle, there's an aisle for greens and like beans and stuff like that. And that was another food that I don't eat anymore. I don't eat beans as well, because I have the same problems with starches, things like greens. I get bloating and stuff like that, so it seems quite unnatural to eat beans. I don't have good side effects, and you get gas and stuff like that, so this your body's way of telling you this shouldn't be in your body. So there's things like, then there's the cereal aisle, and there's the pastry aisle, and there's sweets and crisps and fizzy drinks and all of that type of stuff. And basically, when you break that down, there's only really 3 aisles you should be buying from: the fruit aisle, the meat aisle, and the vegetable aisle. And all of the other aisles are basically garbage. That's just mass-produced, cheap crap that is made to just make profit. There's no 80% of that food should not even be in the human body. It's kind of an insult, and you can see the negative side effects of these foods. You know, you'll notice as well that these mass-produced foods are very cheap. So that's kind of the industry's way of telling you this is utter rubbish, you know, because we're selling you this dirt cheap. You know, they're not going to sell you nutritionist food. That's one of the things you can look for is when you go into a superstore, look for the foods that are expensive. And like, for example, I eat fish. It's the most expensive meat. So that's another way of, you know, whereas you look at something like chicken, it's the cheapest. So basically, the industry is kind of saying to you, this is kind of better quality. Fish is better quality. Chicken is not such good quality. And it's the same with like grains in comparison to like fruits and vegetables. If you look at it gram for gram, you know, a pound of maybe like sort of leafy greens and what would cost significantly more than like a whole bag of like pasta. And it's kind of just a way of the industry kind of telling you this is really low grade, this is really high grade. And they charge you more for it. So that's kind of a sort of interesting sort of thing that you can do. Just walk through the aisles and look for what are the most expensive items, and that's kind of the industry telling you these are good quality nutrition, and the cheap stuff, that's poor quality nutrition. And like I said, you can tell the effect this is having on people, especially within the UK. The number one financial burden on the NHS is ill health through poor diet. That's costing the country £7 billion a year because of people's poor eating habits. Number 2 is obesity, number 3 is smoking, and number 3 is alcohol. And I would actually argue that people who have negative side effects from smoking and alcohol, if they had a better diet, there would be less negative side effects from alcohol consumption and smoking, because people's diets would help to bolster their health. A real good study looking at sort of people in Japan is that Japan has one of the highest rates of people that smoke, but they have one of the lowest rates of lung cancer. So there's a paradox there. And my rationale behind it is because they have, on average, a better diet. And because they have a better diet, there's less incidence of lung cancer because their bodies are just healthier. They're able to cope with smoking a lot better than we are. So I would actually argue that diet also contributes to these other two financial burdens, smoking and like, so if someone drank alcohol every day, but they were eating a healthy diet, they'd be able to cleanse their body a lot more efficiently than someone who doesn't. It just makes logical sense. So yes, you can see that actually these superstores are kind of, they're ruining our health. And it's not necessarily that they're ruining our health, it's to do with people's choices. We're choosing to buy this crap because we want to save money. And we need to have a little bit more courage and a little bit more self-control to kind of like avoid those foods. Because if people are continuing to purchase those food items, those aisles will continue to grow. And basically, you know, it's a demand-supply relationship. If people start purchasing the healthier foods, the more expensive foods that are actually good quality and good for your health, guess what? They will get cheaper because companies will start to compete to provide those foods to you at a cheaper price. So start to buy more healthy foods and start buying this cheap crap that they're essentially killing us with. And basically what will happen is we can start to like transform the type of foods that are seen in superstores. So yeah, there's a lot wrong with the food industry. It's really not good, and I have very things are not getting better, they're getting worse. And yeah, the research is in, things are not getting better, they're getting worse. Even though we have all of this kind of thing, you know, society's growing and it's advancing and everything's getting better, it's our health is not. Our health is getting way worse. And so yeah, I want to talk about also potential future areas where my diet can go. So obviously, yeah, you know that I am someone who's interested in Taoism. And Taoist philosophy is very geared towards, it promotes a vegetarian diet. And I would love to be a vegetarian, but the problem is I have an allergic reaction to dairy consumption. So if I could eat milk and stuff like that and drink, if I could drink milk and eat cheese and stuff like that, I would be a vegetarian. but because I have an allergic reaction to dairy consumption, it would mean that I would only be able to be an octo-vegetarian, so that is someone who only eats eggs and then plant food. And I just think that's very limiting. The only plants or the only animal product that I would consume would be eggs, and I just don't feel that is. I don't think that's a fulfilling diet, in all honesty. So what I've done is I've replaced dairy with fish, and that's how I've came to the conclusion that sort of this is the optimal diet for me. That sort of plant-based diet, and then I would consume fish and eggs, and basically that's as much animal products as I want. So yeah, also, but obviously there will be periods of time where I might consider going fully vegan, especially when I'm doing like precept following, so I'll have to abstain. Once I'm really trying to cultivate and develop the 5 Taoist precepts into myself, which the first one is no killing. So no killing means that I can't eat meat or anything like that. So that in the future I will probably experiment more with, you know, really trying to go sort of vegan and fully plant-based and stuff like that, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to sustain it for my entire lifetime. I'm just going to show you a real good book that I have. So this is a monster of a book. So this is a book called Healing with Whole Foods, Asian Traditions and Modern Nutrition. It's a beast. So this is basically, it combines East Asian philosophy with sort of Western science. And this is basically the book that I am going to get around to studying. So this is kind of where I want the future of my diet to go. I'm going to dive right into this here and start learning. I've had this for quite a while. It's obviously, you can see it's a huge book. It's not something you can just pick up and browse through. It's quite a bit of intensive reading. But that I'll probably link that down in the description actually, because you'll be able to get that. It's a brilliant. I mean, this you don't need any other book. Once I study this, there will be no other book that I need to understand as far as nutrition is concerned. But yeah, this promotes a sort of plant-based kind of diet. So yeah, that's basically the future of my diet. Is I'm going to start to focus more, make it more Taoist aligned, or more sort of have like a more Eastern sort of feel to my diet. And also I want to start incorporating like fasting as well. And this will also, so this thing I'm going to do in the future, I'm going to call it my karmic reset. And this is basically going to be an extended period of time where I'm going to develop the 5 Taoist precepts. And I'm going to be experimenting with things like fasting and stuff like that to help purge my physical body, to help kind of reset everything. And so yeah, fasting is something that I'm going to start incorporating more into my diet, probably once a week, or maybe if I'm doing this, if I get up to the point where I'm only eating 2 meals a day, 2 1,000 calorie meals a day, I'll probably end up doing fasting every single day. So yeah, that is really it for my video. I really wanted to just cover my sort of dietary philosophy. So yes, that's it for today. So yes, my name is Jason Ankin. This is my vlog channel. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can put it down in the description. I will link this book, this beast of a book, down in the description below if you want to go check that out on Amazon. You can also follow me on Instagram at jason.ankin. And that is it for today, guys. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.